The alarm goes off and something in your chest tightens before your eyes are even fully open. A machine screaming a number at you that your body never agreed to. You silence it, lie there for 4 more minutes, and wonder how anyone survived before this thing existed. But the real answer is far stranger than you'd expect. Your body was never actually waiting on the alarm clock to invent the idea of waking up on time. It had a working system for that hundreds of thousands of years before the first gear ever turned. That system is still running right now, quietly underneath the beeping. For most of human history, there was no external device telling anyone when to open their eyes. No glowing numbers, no snooze button. And yet people woke reliably, day after day, well enough to hunt, gather, farm, and raise children who survived to do the same. Something inside the body was already keeping time. That something has a name, the circadian rhythm, a roughly 24-hour internal clock running in nearly every cell of your body, synchronized primarily by light. And roughly is doing real work in that sentence. In the 1960s, German chronobiologist Jürgen Aschoff ran a series of unusual experiments, placing volunteers in underground bunkers completely cut off from sunlight, clocks, and any cue about what time it actually was. Left with nothing but their own internal signals, the volunteers didn't drift into total chaos. Their sleep-wake cycles kept running, remarkably consistent, but slightly longer than 24 hours, closer to 24 and a quarter. Without the sun resetting it daily, the internal clock ran a little slow, like a watch that needed winding by light itself. That detail matters more than it sounds. It means the clock inside you isn't calibrated by clocks at all. It's calibrated by daylight. Sunrise doesn't just brighten a room. It resets a biological mechanism that's been keeping approximate time since long before humans existed, let alone alarm clocks. Long before anyone needed a device to notice that reset happening, the cues were already everywhere. Easy to miss if you're not looking for them. Impossible to miss if your survival depended on it. The air genuinely gets colder in the hour before dawn, cold enough that early risers across very different cultures independently noticed it. Birdsong follows a strikingly reliable order, certain species calling first in the gray light, others joining only once the sky has properly lightened. A fire tended through the night burns down to embers around the same stretch of hours, needing attention right as the sky starts to change color. None of that required counting anything. It only required a body already tuned to notice. So why does it feel so specific, so reliable, this internal wake-up call? A researcher named Nathaniel Kleitman, one of the founding figures of modern sleep science, wanted to know exactly how far that internal clock could be pushed. In 1938, he and a research assistant descended into Kentucky's Mammoth Cave and stayed there for over a month in total darkness, deliberately trying to live on a 28-hour day instead of a 24-hour one. If the body's clock were flexible, purely a matter of habit, it should have adjusted. It mostly didn't. Kleitman's own rhythm stubbornly resisted the new schedule, clinging close to something like its original 24-hour pattern, even with zero light cues telling it what time it should be. The body, it turned out, wasn't just following a schedule, it was running one, from the inside, whether anyone gave it new instructions or not, which raises an obvious question. If the internal clock is this stubborn, this self-sufficient, why does modern life feel like sleep is something that has to be forced, negotiated, engineered with a screaming machine every single morning? That same researcher a few years earlier had already helped overturn the idea that sleep was simple in the first place. Alongside a graduate student named Jürgen Aschoff, Kleitman helped identify rapid eye movement sleep in the 1950s, the stage where dreaming happens, revealing that a sleeping brain wasn't shutting down at all, but cycling through distinct, structured phases all night long, each with its own rhythm nested inside the larger 24-hour one. Waking, it turned out, was never going to be a simple on-off switch. It was always going to depend on which phase of that nested cycle a person happened to be moving through when morning, or a machine, interrupted it. Here's the twist almost nobody mentions. Sleep itself, before industrialization, didn't look like the single unbroken block modern life assumes it should be. Historian A. Roger Ekirch spent years combing through diaries, court records, and medical texts from pre-industrial Europe, and found consistent references to something almost nobody talks about today: first sleep and second sleep. People would go to bed shortly after dark, sleep for a few hours, wake naturally in the middle of the night for a period of quiet activity, praying, talking, tending a fire, even visiting neighbors, and then fall into a second sleep until dawn. Some accounts describe that middle hour as almost peaceful, a household stirring quietly by firelight while the rest of the world stayed dark and still, before settling back under the blankets for a second stretch of rest. This wasn't insomnia. It was normal, expected, barely worth writing about, which is exactly why it nearly vanished from the historical record entirely. What erased it wasn't biology. It was light. As artificial lighting spread, first gas lamps, then electric bulbs, the boundary between day and night blurred, nights got busier, bedtimes got later, and the long, segmented night collapsed into the single compressed block of sleep considered normal today. The clock inside you didn't change. The environment around it did. And once factories entered the picture, the pressure got even stranger. A farm didn't need everyone awake at the exact same minute. Animals needed feeding, crops needed tending, but the precise hour had some flexibility built in, tied loosely to sunrise rather than a number on a wall. A factory floor had no such flexibility. Machines and shift schedules needed dozens, sometimes hundreds of workers arriving at the identical minute, regardless of what the sun or their own bodies happened to be doing that morning. That mismatch created a real practical problem, and the solution, before the alarm clock became cheap and reliable, was almost comically human. In industrial Britain, entire neighborhoods relied on a paid profession called the knocker-up, someone who walked a regular route before dawn, tapping on workers' windows with a long pole, sometimes fitted with wire or peas shot from a blowpipe, until the sleepers stirred and waved them off. The job persisted in parts of England well after the alarm clock had already been invented, simply because a human being tapping on glass was, for a while, more dependable than the machines meant to replace them. Notice what that means. The alarm clock wasn't solving a biological problem. Bodies already knew how to wake up. The alarm clock was solving a scheduling problem, the very modern demand that everyone's internal, sun-tuned clock synchronize to an arbitrary, identical number, regardless of individual rhythm, season, or how dark the morning happened to be. Does that reframe the dread of that beeping sound even slightly? Every time the alarm interrupts you mid-cycle, jarring you out of whatever sleep stage you happen to be in, it isn't correcting a broken system. It's overriding a working one, forcing an ancient, light-tuned mechanism to answer to a number a factory schedule invented a couple of centuries ago and everyone else quietly agreed to keep using. That grogginess you feel some mornings, the specific disoriented heaviness of being woken by a machine instead of daylight, has a name too: sleep inertia, and it tends to be worse precisely when the alarm cuts through a deep stage of sleep rather than a naturally lighter one near the end of a cycle. Modern research on chronotypes adds another layer to this. People aren't uniformly wired to wake at the same clock time even under identical light exposure. Some genuinely run earlier, some genuinely run later, a spread that shows up consistently across populations and doesn't just vanish because a shift starts at 9. Force a naturally late-running body onto an early fixed schedule for years, and researchers have a term for the resulting mismatch: social jet lag, the same disoriented, foggy feeling of actual jet lag, except caused entirely by a clock on the wall instead of a flight across time zones. Adolescents show one of the clearest versions of this. Puberty tends to shift the internal clock later, so a body biologically primed to wake closer to 9 gets forced into a classroom seat well before its own sunrise. Tune's system has finished its cycle, which is part of why so many teenagers look less like they're being lazy and more like they're jet-lagged 5 days a week. The modern bedroom doesn't make any of this easier. A phone screen held a foot from your face for the last hour before sleep delivers a wash of blue-tone light directly into the same system that evolved to read a sunrise, telling that ancient mechanism it's still daytime long after the actual sun went down. The clock doesn't know the difference between a screen and a sky. It just does what it has always done: adjusts to whatever light it's given, and expects a matching adjustment in the dark hours to follow. Think about your own mornings for a second. The instinctive reach for the snooze button isn't laziness. It's closer to a small, ongoing negotiation between the clock, a factory schedule invented, and the clock currently running quietly in nearly every cell of your body, still calibrated to a sunrise you probably didn't even see this morning. Behind curtains, behind blinds, behind a screen that was brighter than the actual sky for the last hour before you tried to sleep. Your ancestors didn't need a machine to tell them it was morning. They needed a window, or a fire that had burned low, or the specific quality of gray light that meant dawn was close, or later, a stranger with a long pole tapping gently on the glass. The system worked, imperfectly, for nearly the entire span of human existence, tuned to a sun that never once needed winding, resetting, or a spare battery. So the next time the alarm cuts through a dream you'll never remember, consider what's actually happening underneath the irritation. Nothing in you is broken. Something in you is simply older than the number currently interrupting it, and stranger and more patient than any machine bolted to a nightstand has ever had to be. The alarm goes off, and something in your chest tightens before your eyes are even fully open. But that tightening isn't confusion. It's an ancient, sun-tuned clock, still keeping perfect time, quietly objecting to being told what time it is by something so much younger than itself.